What's going on, everyone? It's meteorologist Brandon Adams here, and we are going to take a look at the severe threat ongoing in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and eventually the surrounding states as we get into the overnight hours, all the way even into South Dakota now. We have tornado warnings across 4 different U.S. states, all across the center of the country, the most prevalent of which is in Oklahoma here, and we have an ongoing tornado threat here near Perry, Oklahoma. If you are in that area, please seek shelter now. This has been a confirmed on the ground rain wrapped tornado for quite some time now. And I really think this is the main storm that we need to worry about, at least for the time being. We do have the tornado warning down here, certainly something to keep an eye on. A little bit of a tail end Charlie is what they call it. It's the last cell within this whole line of storms that stretches up to the north. Quite often, those cells can develop much more rapidly, or at least kind of have more longevity than anything that might spin up along this area. But this cell is definitely the one I am watching the closest, at least for the time being. Again, this has already been on the ground for quite some time now, and tracking pretty much northeast and east. So this has been a little bit of an interesting scenario because this has started out as 4 separate supercells. The northern one, which was this one, started back in this area, back in through here, and then we just staggered storms. So we had one here, one here, one here, one here, and it's become linear now in nature. But what was aiding in that is that we had flow directly from the south. So each storm was able to get nice inflow and develop for a while. And that's what has eventually led to this one taking over. Had they been stacked more north-south oriented, you wouldn't have seen all these separate supercells merge into a solid line here. You would have seen these northern cells kind of fizzle out. So it was kind of a cool situation to watch. Now we're starting to see some isolated developing cells ahead of the squall line, which again ranges through most of the country at this point. So once again, we're watching Perry, Oklahoma currently very closely. This has been the tightest circulation, the most well-developed, and the longest actual tornado on the ground. Let's take a look at your storm relative velocity here. And you can still see that we have a fairly decent couplet going on here. It's probably not quite as healthy as it once was in terms of strength, but certainly still something to keep an eye on. And then to the south, we have another couplet here for you. And this is something that also needs to be kept paying attention on that one for you, because we are starting to see this tighten up ever so slowly right in this area here. And again, like I had mentioned earlier, a little bit of a tail end Charlie situation. So basically, this cell is certainly one to watch where it's the last cell in the line. Taking the trip up north here, we're starting to see several tornado warnings now up in Kansas and Nebraska. This one, I believe, is associated with a squall line. Yeah, so this one, not so much of an individual supercell, but more associated with the squall line with just a little bit of rotation embedded. Let's see what the velocity couplet looks like on this one. Hard to tell with some radar interference. These spin-ups are often brief and weaker, but that does not mean they don't last. That does not mean that is limited to a brief, weak tornado. They can last longer than that. And also be strong. So this is certainly something to keep an eye on. This one, up in Kansas anyway, certainly has my interest a little bit more just because it's a little bit more isolated. So it's something to keep an eye on, as you can see that hook developing on the radar signature. And then even further north as we go up into Nebraska, near Lincoln, Nebraska. We now also have a tornado warning, and this is also kind of associated more embedded rotation within a developing squall line. We kind of just have a mess of storms in through this region, to be honest with you, with embedded rotation. So certainly the National Weather Service offices are keeping busy tonight. You can see the greens and the reds here. They're not super tight couplet, but certainly something that's worth keeping an eye on. as virtually this whole thing has at least some form of embedded rotation. And then we see all the way up north now into South Dakota area. We are also seeing that same situation where we have some embedded rotation within a squall line, or developing squall line anyway, as you can tell. And these are going to be kind of not so much in the northern half of the country here, but the central half of the country is going to be kind of a developing high wind threat, as these are probably likely to bow out and then push off to the east. And anytime you have the storms bow out like that, you get big wind gusts ahead of that, and that can be straight line damaging winds through the overnight hours. But again, the greatest risk of tornadoes and severe weather as a whole is down mostly in southern Kansas into Oklahoma, with the high risk being including Norman, Oklahoma City, and I believe Wichita into this area for the greatest chance of severe weather and tornadoes. So, as mentioned, this is a high risk scenario. That is the highest level of severe weather risk. It is not all that common. I believe March 31st of last year was the last time that has occurred. And that was not in this area here. It's been quite some time in the Oklahoma region since we've had a high risk. But again, this one here in Perry, or near Perry, Oklahoma, is definitely the one to keep an eye on. In fact, we've lost the tornado warning for the southern cell, so it is just now the storm near Perry, Oklahoma, that is tornado warned at this time, at least in the state of Oklahoma. Again, more towards the north, and we'll keep an eye on those. But this one is certainly continued to develop its hook echo. It's continued to breathe, as you say, kind of have some really nice inflow into it, some outflow out of it, keep the storm bubbling up and staying strong. And this is likely to continue as this heads off into the east. I do want to point out kind of some developing cells back in this area. I do believe that will be the theme. I don't believe this will be your last cell that develops along this line. As you can see, some starting to bubble up here near Elk City, Oklahoma. And I think these cells in through here, if they do end up developing, are going to be the severe threat in through Norman and Oklahoma City. And the reason I say that is taking a look at the HRRR model. This is the 23Z. So we don't quite know. 0Z is coming out. As you can see that the HRRR overnight here near 11 p.m. or midnight develops an additional line here. And that is pretty much at the end of that squall line, as was mentioned. Taking a look at the parameters here. Currently, we're looking about 9 o'clock here. Currently, let's take a sounding. The big thing I want to look at is this hodograph. You see some nice turning and speed shear with height, and that is kind of only just the theme of the night, as you don't want to take it right in the middle of the storm. But as you kind of move forward here, there's an additional amount of forcing that develops near central Oklahoma, near the Oklahoma City area, and that is what is catching my eye personally. Plenty of parameters that just say that this night is far from over. And what I'm fearing now with these systems, or with these storms anyway, is that they're going to be rain-wrapped tornado events, nocturnal tornado events. So that's basically the two worst things you can have. If you have a rain-wrapped tornado, you can't see it until it's upon you. And then obviously nocturnal tornadoes, overnight tornadoes, that will not make the situation any better. So quite frankly, personally, I'm hoping that this is the last one that we really see tonight, but unfortunately it's not what I am expecting to hear. Certainly something to keep an eye out, as again, this one will continue to track east-northeast. Morrison, Perry, and a couple others in through here are the most at threat. Let's see if we have any debris signature. Doesn't look like it for the time being, which is always good. We don't really want it to hit any populated city by any means. And let's check up to the north. How are we doing up here in Kansas and Nebraska? Looks like the Nebraska warnings have expired. So we're pretty much down to just the Kansas warnings. And then we have one right here across basically a 3-state border over here near Sioux Fall. Let's take a look at what we got going on. Again, I do find this situation interesting because this is a little bit more of an isolated supercell here, kind of developing behind the squall line. And then in this tornado warning right in through here near Wheaton, we again just have some we have some rotation embedded within that squall line. So this is going to be a multi-day event, as basically we kind of just shift these tides to the east here for a couple days. Several days of severe threat, several days of potentially damaging hail, wind, and a few brief tornadoes, especially over the next couple days. Today and tonight were the highest risk, but you certainly cannot rule out some damaging tornadoes over the next couple days. I am interested in seeing Michigan in these next couple days, to be honest with you. I've been watching the soundings, and there's some interesting dynamics right up and through this area as a whole, but southern Michigan is kind of catching my eye. So something to keep an eye out on, and I'm sure, hopefully anyway, I can find some time to keep you guys updated. Just figured I'd hop on here and do a very brief update. Hopefully just trying to get the word out, keep everyone as safe as possible. I know there are many people streaming and videos and tweeting and everything else tonight. So just the best thing we can do is get the communication out there and hopefully save life, property, and honestly, the best scenario is that this continues to kind of become more linear in nature and become more of a straight line wind threat rather than supercells with strong, long-lasting tornadoes. So that is the update for the time being. We're going to continue updating you throughout the night as needed, at least for a while here, and I will keep you guys posted. Thanks for watching if you have, and I plan on doing some more of these videos in the near future as the severe weather and everything else this summer kind of takes place. So that is what I got for now, and I will keep you guys updated as necessary.